Hi friends, I am so excited to be going over this passport entry with you today. I went on the most incredible trip to Alaska, and I just don't know if I'll ever get to experience anything like this again. And while everything is still really fresh in my brain, I wanted to start filling out this journal. I actually have a Wanderless Passport from Texas when my husband and I went on the solar eclipse trip that we took back in April, and I haven't finished that one yet. And I just went and skipped ahead to this one because I'm just so excited to share this journey with you. Now you'll notice I did have this page sort of pre-filled out, and that's mainly because I was filming and I didn't realize that it was out of focus for a good portion of it. So I apologize. You didn't miss much, just putting my airline ticket and filling out the top entry page. But I wanted to share a little bit more about this trip, what we did. I don't want to go too in depth because I feel like me filling out this passport is going to be a multi-part series, and I want to be able to share some of the other stories there. But I figured I'd give you a little bit of background on how I ended up way out in Alaska in this tiny little town called Elfin, Cove. But really quick, before I even go into that, I know I'm going to get questions. The pen that I'm using here is the Tombow dual brush pen. It's my go-to, it's my favorite. I'm now outlining that, kind of creating a fun little, I think I started doing it as a drop shadow, but I ended up just going and outlining the whole thing. This one is a Zebra mild liner brush pen. But I am such a huge fan of the Tombow dual brush pens. If you have followed me in any capacity on Instagram or even here on YouTube, you know that I always use Tombow. I am not sponsored by them. I really wish I was. So Tombow, if you're watching this, we do buy a lot of Tombow for our retail store in Palm Springs, but they are my absolute favorite pens. If you're a beginner, they're so great to learn on for hand lettering and illustration. But if you're a pretty talented and skilled illustrator and hand lettering artist, you still love them. Like, you never really grow out of them. So, and here I'm using the Fudenosuke brush pen, which is another one of my absolute favorite go-to pens. You'll never catch me without one. But going back to how I ended up in Elfin Cove, so my cousin, she has been going on this annual fishing trip for years now, and my cousin, I would like to just kind of set the tone here. She is tiny. Like, she is like, you could put her in your pocket. She is tiny. She also has like really bad motion sickness. Like, she's the kind of gal who'll take a Dramamine to get on an airplane. So the fact that she was this tiny little thing going on these wild Alaskan fishing trips on these tiny little boats every year, it always blew my mind, and it was so fascinating to me, and it just sounded like so much fun. And she'd share photos of her with like her big catch, and these fish are like bigger than she is. And I'm sure I've told her many times before, like, oh, I would love to go on a trip like that. Like, that's so cool. So you can imagine my excitement when I get a text from her and she's like, hey, I'm doing this trip. Do you and Craig want to come? And it's like, absolutely, yeah, we want to go. So next thing I know, we're planning a trip back to Alaska. This summer before? When did we go last? I think it was like October of last year. I went on a cruise with my parents, and my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law came along too, and it was fun. Like, I loved it, but we didn't really get to experience Alaska. Cruises aren't really my jam. I really like to go and, rent a car and drive around and, really kind of experience a place. I felt like a cruise was gonna just be a lot of like sitting on a boat, but it was super fun. I mean, I ate so much, we drank so much, I had so much fun with my parents. I don't get to see them as much now that I don't live in the same town as them, so that experience was like 10 out of 10. But my husband and I kept saying like, oh, we really want to come back to Alaska and like really experience Alaska. And let me tell you, it does not get more Alaska than what we did for my cousin's birthday. before we even head into Elfin Cove, we had to spend a night in Juneau. Now, this isn't downtown Juneau where it's cool, where the port is. No, we were staying at this little travel lodge that was walking distance from the airport. So my husband and I walked from the airport with our luggage down the road to this travel lodge. And when we walked up, I just saw all these windows to the hotel open with the curtains flying out the building. And I'm like, is this an active building or is this a condemned site? It was very like Last of Us. So we checked into the hotel and we were on the second floor. And as we're walking through, there's like, I don't know how to describe it other than like the hallways were fluffy. Later found out it was cottonwood. But because all the windows are open, because there's no air conditioning in this hotel, because why would there be air conditioning in Alaska when it's only warm a few weeks out of the year? All like the cottonwood sort of blew into the hallways of this building. But that also meant that we didn't have screens on our windows, so we couldn't sleep with our windows open because we've heard about these Alaskan mosquitoes. And it was just so hot that we joked and called this place the Sweat Lodge instead of Travel Lodge. And Craig had to pull together a MacGyver and create a swamp cooler out of a desk fan that was in the room and a bucket of ice and our luggage. So that was fun. I mean, we left the desert at 120 degrees and I was more uncomfortable in this Sweat Lodge hotel room for like, you know, a 6-hour sleep than I was at home in Palm Springs in the desert in 124 degree weather. But spoiler alert, we survived. We made it to the rest of our trip. Here in this spread, I'm kind of filling out just some of the things that we did the morning of before we headed on a ferry to make our way to Elfin Cove. So Elfin Cove is about 2 hours outside of Juneau, and you can only get there one of two ways. One is by seaplane, and this is a photo I took of the actual seaplane that brings people in, like so tiny. And that's actually how they used to get to Elfin Cove from Juneau. But there was 22 of us that were all part of this group, and so we got a ferry to take us in. And apparently there's an issue with the weather, so like if the weather is bad, then your plane is delayed, or they've got to land it like pretty far from the coast, and then another boat has to come get you. It just seems like a whole big production. But getting there is so beautiful because you're hitting like open ocean, so the water is really rough, but then there's parts where it's glass smooth and you get to see things along the way like puffins and humpback whales and orcas and eagles and just the most incredible Alaskan scenery you could ever imagine. Oh, here in this spread, I'm filling out where we stopped to eat before we got on the ferry back in Juneau. Go to Forbidden Peak because that place was amazing. It was a really, really good brewery. Another sidetrack moment here. I got a new Canon Selphy. It's a photo printer from Canon that is totally portable, and it prints like actual nice glossy, well, I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of photo paper you get, but it prints like actual photos on photo paper. And I have it plugged in here. You can put batteries in it and just like take it with you. It pairs to your phone, and I am obsessed with this. I am ride or die Fuji Instax, but this was really, really cool. You can see me using it here, and there's like options to do like a film strip. You could do a single 4x6 photo. You can do a grid photo. Here I'm picking 4 photos to make a 4-photo grid that I can then cut up and put into my passport. It's not like an adhesive paper like some of the other portable Canon printers. This is actually like a real photo printer. I liked how quickly the app also loaded photos. I could go pretty far back in my camera roll and easily pull up images that I wanted to print. So here I've got my 4 photos, and you can go in and edit them. You can adjust the crop, the color, contrast, all that fun stuff. And when you do that, it lets you edit each individual image, so it's not your grid as a whole, which is really nice. And then you just hit print, and it's super easy. And I thought it was going to take a long time to print, but it's pretty quick. And I like that it shows you the process of printing. This is ultra satisfying, so I'm just gonna let this run. But it pulls the paper through. Oh, so the cartridge in the front is where it holds the paper. And it does take an ink cartridge as well. And as you print, it prints in layers. So it starts with your yellow layer, and then your magenta layer, and then your cyan layer, and then it spits out a perfect little photo. It's so cool. And if you were wondering, I got this on Amazon. I'll link to it, but I got a great deal because it was the printer, and it came with 2 boxes of film and toner. And there's, I don't know, there's like 200 sheets of photo paper, which is great because if you're using like I am, where you're printing 4 photos, I mean, it's going to last you forever. But the whole thing was $1.99, which is such a great deal. So here I am, I'm just taking it apart. This little tray and cartridge that holds your film, you just turn it off, close the front, and get it out of the way. Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out where I'm going to put my pictures, but I love starting with photos because it just makes it a little bit easier to figure out where I'm going to write later. And I don't love to write. I think part of my ADHD means that my brain moves faster than my hands, and sometimes when I have to write things out, it starts to get really sloppy. Giving myself more confined spaces to write really helps with brevity and making me just write less and spend more time doing the things that I like to do, which are the doodles. So seeing as we are almost at the end of this video already, I didn't really get to share much about my Alaska trip, but that's okay. And that's actually perfect because I really want to go through and talk through the spreads, either as I fill them out or maybe doing a sketchbook tour at the end or a Wanderless Passport tour, because this really truly was like such an incredible trip. And I cannot wait to share more with you. If you've got any questions about Elfin Cove, Alaska, or you want to share your experience, drop it in the comments. Love to hear about it.